This has a simple purpose: to try to give the outline of an incredible story about one man's fight for justice against what he claims to be an astonishing example of police corruption and the subsequent failure of the court system.
David J. Ford has been fighting for that fight for 25 years and has now decided to document this amazing case. If retired businessman Dave Ford gets his long-desired day in court, then it will be a precedent of immense importance that will send lawmakers scurrying. Success in this case would mean that any person with an alleged complaint against the police may hold the Chief of Police personally responsible for any serious misdemeanour carried out by any member of his force.
The real point of the action is that it will allow Dave Ford to reopen a case, the results of which will reverberate right down from the highest levels of the police force to the officer on the beat. There are at this time 7 serious charges former Police Commissioner Condon will have to face, and probably a dozen more which will cause severe embarrassment.
For almost 25 years, Dave Ford has been grinding through the system, trying to get answers to a conventional manner about a textbook miscarriage of justice. Each of the 7 charges brought against the now Lord Condon have been the subject of different complaints at different times. Despite this, none of the 7 have ever been properly investigated or resolved.
The charges collectively amount to police officers conspiring to pervert the course of justice, police corruption, collusion, false evidence, incorrect procedure, and the non-return of property.
Dave Ford has challenged the police, saying, "Should any of the police officers I mention in this book wish to prosecute me, they may have my address. Just let me know which court and I will be there early waiting for you." If Ford's evidence is to be believed, the million or so words in his well-worn dossier make a strong case that the police have a lot to answer for.
The case involves a set-up sting by police acting on information received from an unreliable police informant who is alleged to have been paid handsomely for this information. The case also involves the planting of incriminating evidence, the making of false statements to frame at least 4 men, all of whom ended up in custody, and that mysterious sale of 5 stolen paintings which actually were never stolen in the first place. The strands of this case go through a very murky world of a covert homosexual ring based at a luxury country mansion, and then through the equally seedy underworld of petty South London criminals, eventually leading to a police sting in a motorway services car park.
A key allegation is that police found out at a fairly early stage just who had been involved in the original robbery, but for reasons of their own did not arrest the robbers, preferring instead to set up a complicated sting to blame it on a set of people who had only become incidentally involved and at worst were only bystanders.
In 1985, as part of his normal business, Dave Ford undertook to buy and sell some valuable paintings. Little did he know, as he went to meet a potential buyer, that he would soon become embroiled in a 25-year fight for justice against one of the worst examples of police corruption in modern British history. The story begins in 1982, when it was alleged an aggravated armed robbery took place at Thorne Manor Lodge, home of a Derek Sherborne. Fine art with an approximate value of £100 million was stolen, a record at the time. The first sign of anything going wrong occurred when the attending officers, led by D.I. Leach, appeared not to have followed correct procedure. For instance, there is no evidence that forensics were called to the scene or that anyone took a full inventory of the alleged missing items despite the nature of the alleged crime. The evidence that there was more than police incompetence at work is well illustrated by the fact that a number of police officers involved in the investigation offered to return the artwork to Sherborne for a sum of £10,000 and that arrests would not be made. The money was paid to the police officers by Sherborne's bank manager in cash as requested, but the alleged stolen items were not returned. Sherborne made an official complaint to the Police Complaints Board. This serious accusation was upheld and resulted in officers involved in the case being sacked, taking retirement, or in the case of D.I. Leach, being taken off the case and transferred to another station. These extraordinary events have led to some to ask whether a robbery did actually take place, or indeed at what time the officers decided to act on their own behalf. Dave Ford entered the story in 1985 when he bought 5 paintings by artists such as Gainsborough and Sir Thomas Lawrence from a man called Barrymore using an agent called Freddie Brazil. Being a cautious businessman, Dave had done all the proper checks and made sure that all the legal requirements had been taken care of using all means available to him. The paintings had been cleared by both British and American customs twice, having recently been sent to and returned from America, where they were offered for sale. All the documentation necessary to make the sale had been gathered. Dave Ford had never supposed himself to be a major art collector, but instead was more interested in the pictures, intending to sell them on for a reasonable profit. Dave let various business associates know about his paintings and was soon approached by a man who claimed to have a prospective buyer. Soon enough a deal was struck, and Dave arranged to meet the buyer at a motorway service station in Heston. Taking care to pack the paintings himself, Dave wrapped them in blankets, placed them in a large box and placed them in the boot of his car. He then set off to meet the buyer and complete the transaction. On arriving at the service station, Dave parked his car and went to buy himself a sandwich. In front of him as he left the car there was a group of men dressed in white overalls, apparently playing football. Within seconds the men revealed themselves as undercover police and immediately arrested Dave Ford for handling stolen property. Somehow the police knew that the box in Dave's car contained stolen works of art. It was immediately obvious to Dave that he'd been set up. The police had wrongly been informed that Dave had artwork that was part of the aggravated armed robbery which allegedly took place at Thorn Manor Lodge in 1982. The arresting officers tried to charge Dave with the robbery, but later reduced the charge to handling. In the end, Dave was given a 2-year prison sentence for retention, despite the fact that he had affidavits clearly showing all the details of the purchase from the seller's agent and the man Dave took the delivery from, as well as the documentation that came with the paintings from America. Since receiving his sentence, Dave has been fighting for the return of his property and has been trying to sue the Metropolitan Police and bring criminal charges against them. Dave has been fighting his way through the High Courts and has been thwarted by a series of legal technicalities and blatant refusals by the then Commissioner of Police, Lord Condon, to face him in court and defend the actions of his officers, despite having been summoned to court on several occasions. In 1995, things became even more complicated when Dave's house was raided by the police because of a tip-off that stated he was in possession of stolen bearer sharer bonds. Officers from the South East Regional Crime Squad conducted a search and seized 92 such bonds with a value of 2.8 million. But when Dave was booked into Wimbledon Police Station, only 54 bonds appeared on his custody record, a fact that Dave has strong evidence, including a statement of a police officer who clearly states that a fellow officer cashed some of these bearer bonds in. At the time of his arrest, Dave explained that the bonds had been left to him by his father some years before, but the police ran the required worldwide checks on the bonds and found that they were neither forgeries nor stolen, but yet they refused to return them to Dave. Their refusal to return Dave's bonds was apparently based on the fact that it was to prevent him using them for fraudulent purposes. Incredibly, now Dave had a new battle on his hands and has made numerous legal representations to Scotland Yard to have the bonds returned, but to no avail. Dave claims that the now Lord Condon is responsible for illegal retention of his goods, which includes the paintings and their documentation, and his bearer bonds worth approximately 2.8 million. Dave's life has been a world of legal arguments filled with jargon only a trained barrister could understand. Consider the fact that almost 30 lawyers have lacked the courage to see his case through once they felt the pressure that can be brought to bear by the highest courts in the land, leaving Dave no choice but to develop his legal knowledge, and has at times been forced to continue his case with little or no legal support. This story may seem unbelievable, especially taking place in a country that supposedly prides itself on its fair legal system. Perhaps it's worth reflecting on the fact that at that time the UK had the second worst human rights abuse record in Europe, second only to Turkey. Dave Ford wrote this book to promote his case and get publicity for it, and I'd like to read you what it says on the back page. My aim is to provide evidence of a miscarriage of justice by the top echelons of the police force and courts, i.e. ex-Commissioner of Police Sir Paul Condon, together with his barristers and solicitors, and also the Master of the Rolls at the Royal Courts of Justice. If the apple at the top of the pile is rotten, what are they like at the bottom? A mass of parasitic maggots. The everyday uniformed police officer is excluded from the above statement, as for the most part they perform a difficult service and may need to risk life and limb on duty to protect us and our families. Having finally brought my case to the Master of the Rolls at the Royal Courts of Justice, one would have thought justice would prevail. Not so, as you shall see. If a defendant cannot get justice here, what hope is there for us, the laymen and women of England, to get justice at all? Sir Paul Condon, as ex-Commissioner of Police, should be of sound character and be seen to uphold the law for all citizens, even if this means recognising corruption in his own ranks. In my case, it is my opinion that he has chosen to ignore the truth and has hidden behind his power of office to protect bad apples within the police force. As such, I do not believe he has the moral fibre necessary to hold such a powerful position. Well, you may have ignored me, Sir Paul Condon, in the hope that I would have given up my quest for justice, but I can assure you that I'm innocent and I will fight for justice until my dying day. I'll let you, the reader, be my judge and jury. What is your verdict? This is the true story of 25 years of trying to get justice. Should any police officer I mention in this book wish to prosecute me, you have my address. Just let me know which court and when, and I'll be there early waiting for you. Not like Paul Condon and the other bunch of cowards named by me in my book. I would expect no mercy should any of you manage to prove me wrong in what I say, as I shall be asking for the maximum punishment when I prove perjury, conspiracy and retention by Paul Condon, the ex-commissioner of the Metropolitan Police, and officers under his control down to the rank of DS. I could go to the ranks of DC, but I'll leave the police to tidy up the rest of their mess themselves.
My name's Chris Parslew, I'm a solicitor. I've been asked to assist Mr Dave Ford in examining some documentation concerning a conviction that he's previously had. Mr Ford?
Yeah, well, I'm going to prove to you this alleged armed robbery is, as I say, alleged.
How do you propose to prove that?
Well, it's quite simple. At the beginning, the paintings we're on about belonged to Mackenzie.
Mm-hmm.
He had a boyfriend, Bishop, and they was together for 5 years.
Right. Take me through it step by step.
In that 5 years, Mackenzie gave Bishop a lot of expensive presents to prove his affection. And amongst them presents were 5 paintings that this case is about.
Yeah.
That was 1975, they started their relationship. In 1980, they had to part company because of illness of Mackenzie.
Yeah.
And Bishop left with all his presents, including the paintings. He was introduced to Barrymore. I don't know exactly when they got introduced, so I'm not going to speculate. But the idea was Barrymore, he dealt with a lot of important people. He was a millionaire in his own rights. He sold £1 million properties at a time to people.
Mm.
And he had contacts. They met. The Barrymore done no more but went to his solicitors, Colin Botty, in the East End of London, and asked him to check the paintings out for a clean bill of health.
Sure.
Which Colin Botty done, and they come back with a clean bill of health. Barrymore got in touch with an attorney in America who said, yeah, he's got a friend who deals with fine arts and antiques,
Mm-hmm.
and an auction house out there. Send them out to him and he'll see. So Barrymore sent them out via the British Customs, the American Customs,
Mm-hmm.
and they come back with a clean bill of health, not stolen, and the attorney in America got his friend, and his friend wanted an affidavit to say where the paintings come from, who they belong to, and Barrymore's got the full consent of selling them.